Hi everybody, I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Stephen Messer, who is the co-founder and vice chairman of Collectivi. Stephen, good to see you. We're talking about this almost Faustian pact that we have to do now with AI in terms of using some of the third-party AI and some of the confusion. I want to start with Collectivi because you've invested a lot in this area. Tell us first what Collectivi does.
So Collectivi has been around for about 9 years. It's short for collective intelligence. And we focus on something called a foundation model. And a foundation model is, think about deep learning AI as a very narrow level intelligence. We focus on the transactional economy, understanding how business is done around the globe for other companies.
Transactional being sales, revenue generation.
Sales, revenue, supply chain, anything that has to do touching revenue, we focus on figuring out how to enhance it, make it more efficient, smarter.
So I want to distinguish deep learning and AI because they're often put in the same bucket, yet they're not quite the same thing. So can you just clarify?
Yeah, I feel like AI counts like calculators these days. Like everything is AI.
You can drive a truck through it.
You could
Big data used to be like that too.
And by the way, half the companies I see with the .ai, I always think to myself, that's the most expensive they've ever put into AI, is just buying the domain name. But yeah, I think that's right. Deep learning is a dramatically different type or approach to understanding the world. And essentially what you're doing with deep learning is you've created a technology that mimics our brain. And then you fed it more information than our brain gets. And it gets smart. And it becomes, at one point, a super intelligence, but in a very narrow category. So it's not going to take over the world if you've trained it on language or the economy. It's only going to be able to do one thing, do it very well, do it better than humanity, but that's it. Which is very different than machine learning. Machine learning is designed to essentially provide an average view of the world, like regression. It says, oh, most people in our world.
So it's taking ambient data and it's basically distilling trends?
It's actually even worse than that.
Okay.
What it is you have a data scientist whose job is to know the area and be an expert. Then they do something called feature selection. You don't even know what a feature is other than it's a little piece of data like first name or city or
because they glean what's important.
They decide of all the data that's available how to narrow it down to a smaller amount of features that they think matter. And then they use a historical run that says, oh, for the last 2 years, these 4 features really mattered in predicting things, which is great until the world changes.
Right.
Which, thank
God.
Black
swans and machine learning do not go along.
Well, I was going to say, thank God in the last 4 years, we haven't had a once in a lifetime thing happen every quarter, like, I don't know, pandemics or hyperinflation out of nowhere, massive interest rate changes, World War III. Like, thank God these things don't happen because these models break every single time you need them the most because they've simplified the world. In essence, machine learning is trying to make like below average people average, whereas deep learning is trying to give everybody a superpower. That's the big difference.
And let's equate that now to the conversation at the moment is all about generative AI.
Yeah.
Let's draw this back to that. And again, contextually, let's remind people where you sit on this and where you've invested.
So let's go through the ones that have become popular today. Right. So in generative AI, the first one is like a ChatGPT or a Bard or an Anthropic. And there, the reason why I mentioned it's a superpower is I can't write my mother a poem for her birthday like Eminem until I have ChatGPT. All of a sudden now, I am this superhuman. I could write a Seinfeld skit about her birthday and I can do it in minutes. That's a superpower I could never have gotten before. That's an example of generative AI. In imagery, I am not an artist. I can go and type in a whole bunch of words and get a great photo from Midjourney or DALL-E or one of the other ones. I can do that. Now I can do that with video. I could actually take my script of Seinfeld and then make a video.
Make a Hollywood movie.
Make a Hollywood movie. If only people weren't on strike, I could now make the movie for myself and watch it and find it really funny. These are examples of things where generative AI, in our world, I can take someone and say, here's how to go about doing your business. Here's who to sell to. Here's how to tell them. Here's who's going to be involved. All of these things are providing the average person these capabilities that they would never have had before. And I think that's why it's so disruptive to the world.
And inducing paranoia, because I think one of the things that keeps coming up is there was a period where you could have a last mover advantage. Like, you know what, I'm just going to wait and see how it all falls out and I'll go with the winner because, I want to end up with Ford and right now there's 100 car companies. This feels like this moment, if I'm not a first mover, then everybody's going to get ahead of me. So let's start with that because really the model you have is you work with other companies. That's what collective I is, right? You have,
Yeah.
so what are you seeing in terms of where the dumb money is going, or the questions that you're getting around that decision point of what do I invest in? Do I let ChatGPT in the door and I'm good to go?
Yeah, look, I understand why it's
in 30
scary.
seconds or less. I'm just kidding.
30
Okay.
Okay, I understand why people are scared. The world that they know has completely changed. This might be the most disruptive thing that's ever happened in humanity, beyond Sputnik, beyond the discovery of the hydrogen bomb, all of these things. And the reason why is, for the first time, there's a cognitive superintelligence in every field. And we don't know if it's going to take us over or we're going to work with it. And I think it's more likely the latter, but that means we're changing everything we did.
Right.
That's something that people can't get their arms around. Everyone thinks back to the old technology paradigms of if and then. If this happens, do that. And so everyone looks at ChatGPT or some of these other things and say, oh, I'm going to take exactly what I used to do and increment on it. So let's think for a second. The most disruptive technology that's ever hit humanity, and everyone's thinking about, how do I incrementally improve what I'm doing?
By that, I mean, like, for example, my customer service operations.
Oh, yeah.
How do I, use AI to better chat bots? Like, what are we doing that is almost pedestrian in terms of the potential?
Someone comes in, let's use that as an example. Someone says, hey, I've got a problem with my product. And they're like, great, I can now get rid of an expensive person and have a machine do it and do it great. Fine, that's an interesting thing, but what happens if it's able to actually solve the problem from beginning to end? Or what happens if it starts spotting that you're having problems and actually just solves it for you?
Is that not a good thing?
It's an amazing thing, but no one's thinking that way. They're all thinking, how do I use this in my current way of working?
So it's an innovator's dilemma. I don't want to disrupt my business model too much, because that's the other interesting challenge. There's the homegrown technology, and then there are the bards of Google, the OpenAIs, with Microsoft, where they've invested all that money, but it feels like you're letting a lion into your den to train it in what you do.
And I think that's going to be the hardest thing for CEOs today. One, they're thinking too small. How do you solve that? They're going to have to bring in someone who knows this stuff onto their boards, because they cannot figure this out.
And is it a misplaced fear to be worried about training an algorithm to do what you do? Because in all honesty, companies like Grammarly, Jasper, there's a real sense that they are disrupting themselves by using third-party technologies.
Some of them, in their world, they were a language model without realizing it. And then they didn't invest. I think a lot of people didn't believe this stuff, because if you looked at GPT-1 or any of them, BERT, any of the players out, they were not great, right? Like a child, they were kind of funny, right? And like a child, they were learning. It's designed off of our brains. And as they started getting better, they went from, the kid who used to be next door, who used to say some funny stuff, to all of a sudden he's going to college and he's okay. And then all of a sudden they're amazing. And it came out of the blue for them. And now for a lot of those players, they were late. They did not invest the dollars to build their model. And now they're going to hope for what? Llama 2, hoping that Facebook saved them because they're not going to train OpenAI, but it's too late. OpenAI didn't need them for that. So I think in one sense, CEOs are thinking far too small, and they're thinking with fear as opposed to opportunity. So they're not saying, how do we disrupt our whole business? How do we do something before somebody else does it to us? The second biggest thing is they have to decide who their partner is, if it's friend or foe, because deep learning requires more data to make it work in its current form today than any company has on its own. So our model, you mentioned, every company that joins us is contributing to the knowledge pool that the AI is using. But in our case, one, we don't compete with anyone, so thank God. But two, we're personalizing insights back to each individual user, so it's all different.
So let's unpack that a little so people understand. When people are contributing data, the model that you're looking at is around sales, for example. So they have to contribute proprietary data to be part of Collective I, and in return, what do they get?
So it's a range of different things that they get. But the thing is, you're right. They're first coming in, they're saying, look, this data that I've got locked up in my CRM or ERP and all this other stuff that they've historically kept, and they're like, oh my God, this is so valuable. Today it's not, because you can't really unlock value. And my example always is, you've heard for years people say things like, oil, data is the new oil. But here's the thing about oil. It's useless until you refine it. How many
Right.
refineries are there?
Not as many as there are people taking it out of the ground.
That's exactly it. So what happens is it's really expensive to turn this crude oil into refined gasoline or something else. And that's what you see emerging with all these AI properties. So in our world, we look and say companies have never known what their revenue is. It's crazy to believe in 2023, salespeople make a prediction of what they think they will do. And thank God they are unbiased. They have no desire to keep their job. They're just trying to give you perfect information. We look and say, on a daily basis, the world is constantly in change. And deep learning loves change. It embraces complexity and embraces change. So what if I could tell you the day something changed in one of your important deals? The exact moment. So you could go in there and solve it before it happens. What if I could tell you that that person who keeps saying, we're going to get this deal, is not truthful? It changes the way you operate, because once you start getting reliability about your revenue, you can start doing things that you never dreamed of, like produce a product before it's been bought, because you have such certainty it's going to happen and where it's going to be needed that you can have it ready for them the day they buy. And it seems like it's same day shipping, even though you had it managed it for 3 weeks. That can change margins and entire business models. It also means you're not playing this game of should I hire or fire. We went through the pandemic. As soon as the pandemic hit, people laid off 25% of their staff, and then they scrambled to hire back those people who I'm sure were pretty happy to come back after being laid off. Like nobody was happy.
Well, what the talent part is where a lot of the fear comes in, because when you talk about going from small child to professor, that does imply you need fewer people, right? Because the machine can do an awful lot of stuff that people used to do. That disruption alone is something that gives people pause. I'm not going to suddenly, let's say I'm a leader at any level. What is your advice how do we embrace AI without disrupting ourselves? Because you don't want the business model to get to the point where you can't get your arms around what it is.
I think that fear is the leadership failure that we're seeing today in most companies. In our own product, we have a section called upskill. I've never seen another technology that focuses on upskilling. As we have this ability given to us, these superpowers, our skills go above. It's not the first time we've had superpowers, right? Think about it, 100 years ago, we started getting the internal combustion engine. I can't run 55 miles an hour. I can't fly across country, but we started getting these superpowers that allowed us to do things that very few people could have done before, which is make the journey out west.
Right.
We did well. Embrace that. And you'll find that there's new skills that we've needed. In no historical revolution did we have less jobs than before. They just shifted to new jobs, and they were better jobs. I don't want to be a coal miner. I don't want to be a truck driver. I want to have jobs that make us more and do greater things. I think that's what this enables.
What's interesting when you talk about, say, the birth of the railroad was also the birth of, I don't want to call them robber barons, it's railway barons.
Yeah.
And now there has been a lot of discussion of this, titans of tech, and this feeling that now the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, those that have the technology, collective, are going to consolidate power, and there's going to be more of this sort of behemoths controlling everything, which has certainly got the attention, perhaps negatively, of Washington.
Yeah.
You're seeing Italy try to stop ChatGPT. What are you seeing in terms of just the fallout of who gets power in this environment? Are we looking in the wrong areas? Because it seems to imply that everybody can have a piece of it from what you're saying. All right, and again, I've asked 10 questions there, but I do think that the powerful seem to be now in a position to become even more powerful, perhaps not to our benefit.
Yeah, this is one of the things that we're fortunate. We've had many successes that enabled us to fund this kind of development, because VCs wouldn't have funded a 7, 8, 9 year project before it produced revenue. That's just not how, and this is why I think they went for crypto over AI and completely missed the AI revolution. But I think it's fair to raise the questions, but I don't know if it's possible to say, can it be small guys that win? Today, the way this technology...
Am I biased in thinking it should be small guys that win? I don't think necessarily.
It's hard, and I'll tell you why. It requires huge scale to make these machines work. They're not as efficient as our brains. When I said it's modeled after our brain, It's modeled after a very simplistic version of our brain. We create artificial neurons. The human neuron is so much more complex than these are. And so that's why they require so many computers. That's why they require so much money to get it going. It's why they require so much data. We can learn something pretty quickly. We can go from riding a bike to getting on a motorcycle and know how to balance. We have all these capabilities that this technology does not currently have. Mm. So that leads itself to these very large players, right? If you look at Sam Altman, he was able to raise massive amounts of money because he ran Y Combinator.
Yeah.
Demis, who built DeepMind, one of the most important companies of our lifetime, couldn't raise the money and had to sell it to Google, right? He just couldn't get enough people to see behind it. We had to use our own money to do it. And now, yes.
And I should remind people, you had a company prior to this, LinkShare, with you and your sister, and then your CEO, Tad Martin, was with Overstock, right? So basically you came into this venture. Let's walk back a little bit. The genesis of what you wanted to create and the need you saw in the marketplace way back before we were talking about generative AI, what was the gap that you were filling?
So we were looking back and we were saying, okay, we now live in a world where the only part of the world that has not been digitized, that's still based on people's opinions, is the economy. That seemed weird to us, right? If you look at everything else, I mean, people are optimizing keyword. I mean, to amazing degrees.
Which is what LinkShare did.
Yeah,
right?
LinkShare, we did something called affiliate marketing. And so we had this huge network around the world, so efficient, so to the minute you could know everything that was going on. It was amazing. And then we looked at the way the economy operated, and it's kind of crazy. Every time Chairman Powell comes out, I'm always like, he's using a book called the Beige Book that was 3 months old data to make determinations of what will affect the entire world. That to me seems really weird.
Yeah.
So how can you not want to optimize the economy? It's the most important thing in the world. It affects everybody's day to day, and nobody seemed to care.
And the business model around optimizing the economy was what?
So there's a few ways you can monetize it. You can monetize it down to selling licenses. You can monetize it to selling insights. You can monetize it so many different ways. I don't think we cared about revenue to begin. I think we said, can you do this? And what we started seeing emerging was that as the neural nets started getting more and more sophisticated, as more companies kept joining, it just kept getting smarter and smarter. And it got to a point where even when Silicon Valley Bank blew up, the night it blew up, the AI was pointing every deal that was affected, every single company that had an impact, it found through filings, news reports, these emerging properties of how it started thinking was just crazy. This is what we get excited for.
Mm-hmm. So let's get it back to where we are right now. And we're talking to a wider audience than just leaders. One of the conversations people have is, given the breadth of these companies, is should companies like, say, Google be regulated like a utility for the public good, given the power of the technology we're talking about and the power to, frankly, take a lot of the data that others have built and use it for their benefit?
It's funny. The historical belief would be yes, but if you notice, all of those big guys are eager for regulation, almost begging for it, because what they're trying to do is make it very hard for the next players to come up. I don't know if I would be so...
Like net neutrality or something like that.
Yeah, you remember how great net neutrality was? Or all the privacy advocates screaming that cookies were bad, and now they've guaranteed Apple
you think
and Google
there's room for the kind of ambitious upstart in this environment? So the regulatory environment should be let the market work it out. Let's take the second part then. I have to make a decision over what do I invest in so that I can continue to grow without disrupting myself so much that I lose my investors. Hard to say, it's on a case-by-case basis, but any general observations that you're making?
Look, I will give stop the fear and start focusing on, there's a point where greed actually works in your favor. Work on
greed.
Greed
Is good. Are we
Focus
back?
on greed. I'm going to go
Okay.
back to Gordon Gekko. Greed is good because I think fear has been so much of the driver of, oh my God. And even when I hear it's like a nuclear bomb, okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration.
What's the first step? Because obviously one first step is, hey, I'm going to use generative AI and I'm going to use it on our customer service or something where it's a clear value proposition. Is that where the smart money should be going?
So where the smart money is going is, one, trying to make sure there's deep learning being applied to the problem they're solving, not that it has deep learning. In other words, I can add OpenAI to anything and all of a sudden be like, look, I have deep learning. But what I'm trying to figure out is the problem I'm solving, does it use a huge data set to make insights that I couldn't do on my own? And get your feet wet. You've got to start playing with this stuff to learn what it does do and what it doesn't do. A lot of people are sitting there finding reasons to not do it. Our JP Morgan Chase, remember when JP Diamond's like, we're not gonna let anyone use OpenAI. Okay, kudos.
Good luck with that, yeah.
Yeah, good luck. They're all doing it anyway. Like, why not make a decree of it? Like,
that's like
don't
BlackBerry, when it's like BlackBerry versus Apple, and they sort of forgot people were bringing their phones to work anyway. You know, that's kind of...
It's insane, you know, but this is what's going on right now. And I think the people who are afraid of the future, afraid where it's going, are finding excuses not to be able to do it. Oh, it's confidential data, as if this stuff matters. Like, confidential data absolutely matters, but these neural nets don't remember the information in a way that it can ever repeat it back the way people think.
So, Stephen, one thing I want to ask is, what's on your radar that you would put on ours? You know, whether it's, I don't want to say winners, losers, but I think we're mentioning a lot of companies that we hear about every day, all the time. What are some of the ones that you would be keeping your eye on, and perhaps maybe it's the overhyped, underappreciated?
Look, the ones that I think are overhyped right now are everyone trying to create a language model. People are raising billions of dollars to try to recreate an OpenAI or a Bard. And I think the reality is they're commodity products that need huge scale, and all the distribution partners are already gone, right? OpenAI's partnership with Microsoft gave them huge distribution. Google is Google.
Les jeux sont faits, that part of the that chapter's done.
I'm sure someone's gonna make something equally good, but does it matter at this point?
Right.
It doesn't really matter at all. What you're starting to see when you recognize that this very powerful AI is narrow, what you're starting to realize is there's all these other fields. Like, we chose the economy. Proprietary data sets locked up in all these companies. Owning that is owning a huge piece. But I'm not trying to go after language. Right? I'm not trying to go after images as well. Like, I know my lane, and what's going to happen is these things will start to all interconnect. Like, our brain has different regions of the brain. Pick your area. So if someone's going after the ultimate MRI, if they have access to that data set and they're the ones who have it, they will own that field. If someone else has an access to another data set, they will own the field. There are lots of fields available.
Any intriguing players you keep your eye on? Again, I'm not, you know, if they're investing them, let us know. But you've talked about what we shouldn't be paying attention to. What should we be paying attention to?
So I would pay attention to anyone who's got access to a proprietary, like we have a proprietary set. We're very proud of it. Mm-hmm. Super hard to get. It took a long time to get. It's great. I think when you look right now in medical tech, that is a huge area where AI can do a lot. In fact, if you want to talk about regulation today, right now, we have so many restrictions on use of data that we're not going to find the cure to cancer. And I fear countries like China or Russia, places where there is no rules, they own all the data.
If China finds a cure to cancer, better that than nobody finding a cure to cancer.
Unless they use it as a weapon.
Right.
By not allowing people to have access to it unless they do what they want.
So the medical tech space and the proprietary data there.
Medical tech space. I think if you look at space alone is pure AI. It's unlikely we're going to send manned missions everywhere. That is an important thing.
Elon Musk is in a good position.
Elon Musk, Spire, which is a company I sit on the board of, is using a ton of AI to do that. I think even understanding things today like weather patterns. Look what happened in Hawaii. Horrible, right? Partly driven by hurricane-style winds and a fire. These are things that now we can look in real time and understand what is exactly happening and how to start planning to stop it.
That makes the reinsurers very intriguing, potentially.
I
That's
think,
where the data is. Any other thoughts, just in terms of, I know these are conversations we'll continue, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. You know, what else just in the environment right now do you think is distracting us as leaders or even as people in terms of where we spend our time? Because we're at the point, there's so much said about generative AI that you can see people click their minds off like, enough, I've heard enough about it.
Yeah. Look, there is a widget for everything. And I think it's easy to get caught up in the widget for everything. Let's just do this little incremental thing here, a little incremental thing there, or I'm going to do it on my own. I think if you look, all the traditional SaaS providers are terrified of Gen AI.
Right.
Their business model
Software
prevents
as a service providers, yep.
Software as a service prevents the ability to do Gen AI unless you're using a third party like OpenAI, et cetera.
So would a Salesforce be vulnerable? Like what do you
Salesforce is vulnerable. Almost every software as a service company is vulnerable. They're stuck using the lower form of intelligence called machine learning, where it just works on your own data. And now you hear things like
what about Amazon Web Services? I just feel like this is a game show. Yeah, yes or no. But I mean, they must be using deep learning.
Think about what a hard 8 months it's been for Amazon. They were the cloud leader with Microsoft a distant second. One deal with OpenAI, and now everyone's asking, does Amazon have no strategy at all? Why did they miss all?
Have they missed it, or have they just not announced it yet?
Look, the guys who miss it come out with things like bring your own model to work, right? And that's what you see with Amazon. That's what you see with some of the biggest SaaS providers that are out there, is they're saying, you do the work. And this reminds me of the hybrid cloud. You remember that? Mm-hmm. Oh, you can have data on-prem, you can put some in the cloud. How's that worked out, right? They don't exist anymore, right? You realize I have legacy or I'm in the cloud. And that was the big thing that's going on right now, is the guys who missed it are going to all these players saying, you can build your own. And I'm telling you, good luck. Good luck. It won't work. It's insane, but it's an answer because it gives people the fear. Your data doesn't have to leave your cloud and you can yet still have AI. And what you have is an AI that's been trained on one book, not the Library of Congress. Yeah. It's the stupid AI. And that's what's happening right now, but they don't know how to transition. They can't figure out, how do I make it? And their argument will be, there'll be some companies that will never do this, which is funny to hear from companies like Salesforce, people saying this, because what was Oracle? What was Siebel and everybody else saying about moving your CRM to the cloud? They said the same thing. Our customers won't go to the cloud. They're afraid of their data being out of their control. It's the same argument that they're now making about why people aren't going to go to these big Gen AI companies.
So the soothsayer in you says, then the soothsayer would say, pay less attention to the Salesforce, Amazon. I mean, a lot of companies have their hosting, the bulk of your business. Advice for the next several months, is it to just investigate the use cases of these companies that clearly have invested in this technology?
Look, this is, again, the single most disruptive thing in the world. So when you hear incremental improvement to anything, run. That is not the person you need to be with. That didn't work for Barnes & Noble when Amazon came out. I don't think it's going to work for anyone here. What I would recommend is get your feet wet. The one thing you feel most nervous doing, you should test to see if you're right to be nervous or not.
It's like my grandmother, be counterphobic. Do what scares you most. Good advice. Thanks for joining us, Stephen.
Oh, thanks for having me, Diane.